We're here at Kirkleather Museum in an exhibition called Street House Before the Saxons. This part of the museum display doesn't directly relate to the Anglo-Saxon princess. It's about the background story, if you like. It's about the bit that's telling us why the Anglo-Saxon cemetery was sited at Street House. The site was originally discovered because I was looking at an Iron Age settlement that would date to 300 BC to 100 AD in broad terms. And in the course of that excavation we found lots of evidence for the Anglo-Saxon cemetery. We almost immediately in 2005 started to find Anglo-Saxon graves with rich finds. So the story runs in a not in a chronological narrative, but as I was digging the site, different things had occurred. Lots of people had come along to help in the process of the excavation, and it was a really spectacular time. There aren't many sites like Street House in the country that are illuminating our knowledge on these dark ages, and so it was a rare opportunity for people to participate and find out something about this elusive period, and so we had a fantastic range of finds. What's important and significant about Street House is that there's more than one high status grave. We've got at least 6 graves of a treasure status, if you like. So it's not just one wealthy person in some respects. The main person, as I've said, is the princess who's buried or placed within a bed, but there are others that are insignificant locations, have headstones, have furniture around the graves and things like that. Furniture would be something like gravestones, grave markers, being placed in a position of status with other graves in the immediate environs. So all of these things add up to Street House being a significant cemetery, but more pertinently it's the siting of the cemetery within an earlier landscape, and also the ideas about the shape and form of the cemetery, the way that all of the graves are aligned in a square, in the centre of which is the Anglo-Saxon princess, and 2 buildings which may well be a shrine or a chapel associated with this very special cemetery. And all of these things add further status to this site, so that we would explain that it's not just a cemetery, there are buildings inside it, there is some structural form and sequence to how the people have been buried, how they've been laid to rest within the cemetery. And then when you look at the objects, some of them are not just gold or silver in that respect, they've been selected. Some of them are antiques, things that have been chosen as ancient objects that may well have a status significance before they are worn and placed within the grave of the deceased. Items that may reflect status, obviously Christian crosses and things like that. We've got those sorts of motifs in the cemetery. Having some sort of whetstone, which may well be a symbol of power, that can sharpen and transform a piece of blunt metal work into something sharp. We're looking at thinking of symbolism and things in these respects. We had one grave that had 2 whetstones, one each side of the head, with an iron knife laying across each one, forming a cross shape, so that you're looking for motifs and symbols within the grave as well. So there's an awful lot going on here that can be seen and interpreted. So we're now out at Street House at the site of the Anglo-Saxon excavation, and as you can see it's a fine sunny spot, and everyone says to me when I talk about these sites, why Street House, why Loftus? And I say one of the thoughts is you get your washing dry quickly because it's always windy up here, and in the field just behind me there is now a sea of yellow, just like my coat. There's a field of rape today, but every summer after the farmers harvested that, I come along here with a team, we hire a machine, strip the topsoil off to reveal the subsoil surface, which is only about 30 centimetres down, and it's all of the archaeological deposits are cutting into that clay. So as you see it today, you're in a landscape of rolling hills, but 30 centimetres, 12 inches, 1 foot below the ground, you're looking at deposits from the Neolithic, Bronze Age, Iron Age and the Anglo-Saxon period. And so whilst we're in a remote location to the communities living on Teesside today, this was an important point in the Saxon period, but also it's a fine location to come and do an archaeological dig. We think it's a princess burial because of the very high status jewellery and the fact that there's this wooden bed with the iron decorative pieces holding it together. And bed burials are a peculiar ritual. This is the only one in northern England, which is again something to do with its status. And they're usually found in East Anglia, so it may have a tribal element to it, but it's certainly associated with people of high status. So that at this time, in the early to mid 7th century, men are buried with high status items. One would think of the Sutton Hoo burial, which has a warrior, probably Radweld, a king, buried on a boat. And another high status burial is at Prittlewell, where there's a chap who's got all of his warrior accoutrements, his drinking vessels, all of the stuff that he would have in his feast hall, effectively. So men are stereotyped in a way as drinking, warmongering, fighting, vessels, and things like that. Females are of a different status. They're often associated with dignity, Christianity, legitimacy, symbols like this. They're often placed buried upon a bed. So you get the street house example as the only one in northeast England. Local people may think is street house important. The Anglo-Saxon community are aware of it, but I also get lots of enquiries from the continent. So for example, there's this community of people from Angeln and Saxony, which is where the Angles and the Saxons come from, which is southern Denmark, northern Germany, where they are particularly interested in the Anglo-Saxon peoples, because that's where their forebears travelled to and came here. And we've had German people coming to visit the site, to have a look at the sign. They're interested in the story that we're telling about the Saxons, and they are wanting to take the Anglo-Saxon exhibition that's at Street House, the Anglo-Saxon exhibition replicas that are at Kirkleatham, back to go on display in northern Germany, because it's of interest to them where their predecessors, where their forebears ended up. And so I was up here not a month ago with some people who were dressed as Saxons, stood beside this interpretation board just here. In that first year in 2005, we dug the first 30 graves, demonstrated the site was Anglo-Saxon. There was no bones surviving, but the objects were clearly datable and distinctive, and that took the story forward from not just an Iron Age site. The previous year I'd recognised it was Roman, but we also had this Saxon site here. So it was starting to look like a multi-period site that people had, in some sort of reiterative process, come back here time after time to establish settlements or to take over settlements. That's against the background of my much earlier work,
where I'd worked here in the 1980s, where there's a Neolithic and Bronze Age site here. So there's a whole gamut of things within 200 metres of here. You've got, if you like, you could reconstruct a narrative of British archaeology for the last 5,000 years within 200 metres of here. Now, if that isn't interesting to archaeology, local people, residents, experts, people interested in archaeology, nothing is. And that's why this site is important to me. Job and knock, cut and print.